Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musically Speaking. I am Rod DeGeorge, and we are joined today by the one and only Mr. Greg Howe. Greg, how are you doing, man?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Excellent.
All right, well, first off, I have to tell you, the Wheelhouse album is just amazing, flat out amazing. The production, the composition, the playing, everything.
Wow.
It was really cool, really a joy to listen to, like a real inspired piece of work to me when I was listening to it. Can you talk
Wow.
a little bit about what led to going back to the instrumental format? I know last we spoke, you were working with a vocalist, but what caused the change in direction to go to this mostly instrumental format?
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of just circumstances. I try not to force things in my life. So,
Right.
where the flow seems to be taking me is where I try to generally, as long as it's not, as long as we're not going in a direction that too much, counters my agenda, I just feel like let's go with the flow and see what happens. Unfortunately, the Marigold situation, which was the rock band, I thought that the product came out really well. I thought the band did well. I thought that the album was well, and I think the band would have done great had we just been able to keep it together. But there was a lot of inner conflict and just a lot of tension within that particular environment. So it just didn't work out. Despite the fact that everyone in that band is very super talented, and I wish everyone the very best. But I had a lot of, and then I worked with a guy named Michael Grimm. Shortly after that, and another phenomenal singer and great songwriter as well. But there were just again some issues pertaining to management and pertaining to administrative types of things that were a little cumbersome to work out. So there was that. So I was really in vocal mindset. I've really been in that vocal band mindset for a while. It was a little bit of shifting gears, to be honest with you, to get back to instrumental, and it sort of felt like, well, I keep going off these exits hoping to find Shangri-La, but it's I keep getting sent back to the highway I've been on. So let me just get back on that road again.
Yeah.
And I do think that maybe there might have been almost a positive that came out of having stepped away from it, because it did feel a little more inspired than I have felt sometimes in the past. And there were some tunes that were intended to be vocal tunes that got translated into instrumentals, and that often just produces an already unique sounding instrumental song.
Yeah.
Because we tend to approach instrumental music as songwriters, I think, differently right out of the gate than we do with a vocal tune.
Right.
So to try to translate vocal tunes into instrumental is in a certain way it seems like it's in a certain way it's a very logical process, but it's also a very unusual process. And the result was songs like Throw Down and Let It Slip. Those were both really intended to be Marigold follow-up tunes, second album.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Marigold tunes, yeah. But it was actually fun to manipulate them and translate them and, have them show up as instrumental songs. The same thing happened on the Soundproof album with Morning View and Child's Play. Both of those songs were intended to be vocal tunes originally.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's right. It's just nice. Like for me, because I've never really, we've probably talked about this in the past. When I write, I don't write in terms of genre. I don't write in terms of, I'm going to write a jazz song today. I'm going to write a heavy metal tune today. I'm going to write a blah, blah, blah tune. It's just, there's a song idea. Let's get it down and let's see. And then as it comes back at me, it will dictate what genre it's in.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then this is sort of, so in a certain way, the vocal thing is fun because it's like, it puts a fresh perspective on an instrumental tune.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't even know if I've answered your question.
Oh, yeah. No, that was great. That does bring up another question, though. have you ever, or do you see in the future, taking some songs, instrumental songs that maybe you didn't release yet, and someday turning that into what would be a vocal tune? Like, there's so many of your songs that just have such cool grooves and riffs, and it seems like they could go in various directions, you know?
Yeah, the revolving door could go in either.
Yeah,
it could spin either way. Yeah, and I'm trying to think if I have done that. I think we have done that at some point. I'd have to give it some thought to think about when we did that. But yeah, but you're honing in on really the way that I tend to think, which is much less compartmentalized, I think, than certain other people. Not everybody, but than a lot of people I talk with, because I really don't start from a genre, and I'm not starting from a let's write a vocal tune.
Yeah.
Let's write an instrumental song. It's more, I hear something, let's get it started.
Yeah.
And if we had vocals on this, it could go like this way. And if there was no vocals on this, we could do this. So it's not, it would not be uncommon or unusual for the scenario that you just presented to be equally as, much of what I do.
Right, right. Now, we had talked about this last time, but we have similar approaches in writing where we tend to let the song dictate what comes next. And we were talking like you had said that you have an idea in your head and you could come up with like 3 or 4 parts that would work, but you feel that just because they work, that's not the right part. Like there's a part that needs to go there, and you're not going to be happy until that part comes through,
Yep.
And I feel the same way. And when you were working on this and you made the decision to say, okay, let's see what happens if we make this an instrumental tune, how did that flow? Did it seem to come out easy then once you're like, let's see what happens if this goes in the instrumental direction? Did the parts come pretty quickly for that, or?
It's like anything, I guess. Sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Right.
I can't place the exact song, but there was one song I remember that was challenging me for like a whole month. Just there was a missing part, and I couldn't. I knew I had to get the song done, but I couldn't. I just couldn't find the right part to, and I would play different versions, for my fiance or people, and they'd go, oh, it sounds great. Just go with it, Greg. It sounds perfect, But I have to, I got to believe in it.
Yeah.
If I'm going to try to sell it to you to have you believe, if I'm going to have you believe it, I've got to believe it first. So there were a couple of instances, but often it's a very, often it is it's an inspiring endeavor, and it's fun to try out different melodies, to try out different parts, to try out different concepts that aren't going to be the vocal thing or vice versa. And to challenge myself. Can I find something that's kind of hooky that works here that isn't what the vocal line was?
Right.
Is there a totally separate approach? Maybe I can think of a rhythmic thing, or maybe I can get a more exaggerated intervallic thing happening, or maybe a motif or some pedal tone. Let's just see what we can do, and let's try stuff. So usually the process is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But when you're under the gun and when you want, you're like, I got a tour coming up. I have this album's got to be done by this date. And, I've got these other projects that are happening simultaneously. It can sometimes become frustrating and it's my own fault because I'm setting the bar at my own place. That It's my own standard that I have to hit. And if that standard is located somewhere up there, then it's up to me, to either lower the bar a little bit in my own mind, or to just sit there and keep going, stay up till 5 a.m. Then we've got to get it done, So,
But in the end, I'm sure you feel much better that you may have gone through all that to get a product that or a piece of art that you're more comfortable with,
Exactly. That's more representative of what I would like to convey.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Now, we were just talking about this, but as far as like this, to me, sounds like a very inspired piece of work. And
That's so great to hear.
Your recording career is coming up on 30 years now, closing in. So that brings the question, like, what keeps you so driven that you can come out with such an inspired piece of work after so many years in an industry that can be very uninspiring? Like, we've all felt it. Dealing with the business aspect of it can sometimes just suck the life out of you. You know? Like, what keeps you driven to keep working and to come out with something like this? You know, because so many artists at this point in their career, you can tell, are kind of phoning it in, you know?
Yeah, they're sort of, exactly. You know, it's very strange. It's a great question that you're asking. And, you know, for me, it's odd because my relationship with music is very similar to a personal relationship in that I've been in relationships that have lasted, 3 years and felt like, 20 years. Like, when is this going to end? I've been in relationships that, the most recent relationship I've been in has been the longest relationship I've ever been in, which is now about 15 years. And it feels like it still feels like it's brand new. It feels like it's hard for me to comprehend that because it's like, we just met, you know? And it's with music, it's very similar to that, where it just doesn't seem like, the number 30 years is just, it's hard to comprehend it because in my mind, it's like, okay, I did the first album and then I did a couple other things, and now let's really, now we're really going. Yeah. Like, it just feels like it's still kind of a new, exciting thing.
Right.
I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't feel at all like 30 years of, can't believe I'm still doing this. It just doesn't feel that way. It looks that way chronologically, and if I look at things, I'm like, this is hard to believe. Yeah. But it really doesn't feel like that. It feels like, okay, Greg Howe, Introspection, 5, just a couple albums with Richie, did some stuff with Victor Wooten, Dennis Chambers, put a vocal project together. Let's get back to some instrumentals. It doesn't feel like this long thing.
Right.
I think and to be honest with you, a lot of my sort of more actively touring sort of part of my career, I didn't do a lot of that in the 90s. I didn't do a lot of touring. Most of the touring that I did in the later 90s and in the early 2000s was as a sideman for bigger groups. Right. And
bigger groups like Michael Jackson, NSYNC, Justin. You kind of like brush that off, like for a couple people, you may have heard of.
Right. Yeah.
But
I should rephrase. Right, for the right. Yeah. Some of the biggest pop artists of all time.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I meant. Right. And so I think that can also wear on you. I think if guys have been out touring a lot, like, I'm sure that, before B.B. King passed, I'm sure that it had to feel like we've been at this for a minute, Yeah. We've been doing this for a while, because he's been touring his whole life.
Right.
The touring life is, it's fun, but it's not, it's not a luxury lifestyle.
Exactly.
So I think for me, just particularly in the last 10 years, really just getting out a lot more is part of also maybe why it doesn't feel so long. I don't know. We haven't gotten to this yet, but I was working with Simon Phillips. I did an album with him this year.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And Simon actually had his 60th birthday one of the days that I was there at the studio. And how long has this guy been at it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really even more, it's like a whole extra decade. And he's played with everyone and done everything and been everywhere. And yet, when you watch him work in the studio, it's like you're watching a 19-year-old kid doing his very first album ever. It's all the excitement, all the enthusiasm, all of the spontaneous creative energy. And it's really inspiring. And
Yeah.
I had recorded that album in February, and I think it probably did help me with my own album, because I sort of had to stop production on my record for a minute and then sort of do his record. And it was really nice because I felt more inspired coming off of that.
Yeah.
Really not so much even from a musical place, but more from a, it's okay to still be excited about this. There's nothing wrong with that. And people feel that, I think. They can feel it in the music. They can feel it in the I guess really honestly, the more broad question that you're asking and I'm trying to answer is that if I'm not inspired, I'm not going to do it. I can't bring it to you. I can't deliver you something that I don't believe in. And I can't believe in it if there was no inspiration that was hovering around it as it was being made.
Right.
So that's like the most important thing to me. That's when people talk about writer's block and things like that, and we've all experienced it on some level. But the truth is, if I'm to be honest, I've never really actually experienced writer's block because I could always write something.
Yeah.
It's just writer's block in terms of the inability or the difficulty in hitting that standard.
Yeah.
And I can write a song. I could write a song right now, but for it to be something that I believe in, something that's fresh, yet hooky, yet has a moving quality to it, chord changes that make you feel things, a groove that makes you head nod, a melody that you remember, to have all those ingredients be in a way that, happen in a way that satisfies my own standard, that can often be challenging. Especially when you've written a lot of songs and it's like, I could do that. Well, that kind of sounds like that song I did back in '95. That sounds like, so it's generally a fun challenge though.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And it comes through in that enthusiasm, like you were talking about with Simon Phillips. I mean, I agree with you. I think you can feel that in the music.
Yes.
I can feel in your new CD when I listen to it. And when I interviewed Carlos Santana and Neil Schon, those guys have been at it for a while, but their Santana 4 album, when I was listening to that, it sounded like they were having a blast,
Yeah.
And I think people who are just true fans of music, and there's musicians that really connect with the music, and then there's performers. I think performers may burn out quicker than musicians because musicians have that deep connection to the music, and that in and of itself can breathe life into something. And I definitely hear that in this latest recording, and you get all excited listening to it. At least
that is great to hear.
Yeah. So
it's really the goal that I've always had, and not to cut you off, but it's interesting to me sometimes, particularly in this line of work, the guitar instrumental, this niche market.
Right.
And I think that, I often, there's always new guitar players coming out, incredible young guys coming out doing crazy things. And I hear a lot of great new players, or at least potentially great players coming out. But I guess the thing that I want to hear more, or the thing that I think a lot of people miss still, is how much of a self-indulgent endeavor is this? Are you trying to impress people, or are you trying to affect them?
Yeah.
Are you trying to move me with your music, or are you just trying to show me what you're capable of? They can both be entertaining on some level, but there's definitely more depth to, when I'm doing a meet and greet at the end of a show or whatever. There's in some situation where I'm meeting a lot of people and signing autographs and all that. And people will say very flattering things to me. But there's nothing nothing makes me feel better than when someone says, when I listen to this particular song or that particular album, it reminds me of this thing I was going through in my life at that time. I met my girlfriend when we was listening to such and such song, or this album got me through this period of my life. When I listen to these songs, I get a feeling about it, and it really uplifts me.
Right.
That's much more my goal. That's much more hitting the mark on what I would love to accomplish as an artist than it is for saying, hey, dude, you're the greatest guitar player on the freaking planet. You're awesome. I mean, yeah. I understand that's flattering and it's nice and nice things to say. And I know that it's usually people just trying to be nice. But as an artist, that's what I want to do. I want to do it. It's, a guy that's painting a beautiful picture that I see in a museum. If it catches me, it's not catching me because of its detail or because of its technique.
Exactly.
There's a feeling, and I'm either identifying with it and I'm resonating with it, or I'm not. It either brings up an emotional response or it doesn't. And so that's really always the starting point for me with music. I have to feel it first before I'm going to even attempt to try to make it. That's why I can't just throw something together and go,
right,
here's a bunch of chord changes and a cool groove. It all works together. So let's put it. I've written so many songs that would technically be considered, perfect little entities, nice chord changes, but they're not making the hair on my arm stand up.
Right.
And so I'm not going to put it on a record, or a CD.
Yeah, that's very true. There are so many great technical players out there, but and over the years, there's been so many CDs that I've purchased that you can have total respect for the person of their level of play, but I only listen to it once or twice,
Right.
And
right.
So to me, it's like if I'm the stuff that stands out most to me is the stuff that you have an urge to listen to,
Yes.
You don't want to, you're not pulled back to listen to this because, he just did these 4 amazing sweeps in a row. And,
right.
The technique it's great. And I think we all should build enough technique to get what's in our head out through the instrument. But when things sound like exercises, they fall flat on most ears.
Yeah, right. It misses the mark in terms of at least the mark that I would be shooting for, which is to affect you. But yeah, so I think I think we're on the same page.
Yeah. Now, to get a little more in depth in a couple of these tunes, because like I said, I had to laugh at myself when I was listening to this and writing questions. I was up to like 15 questions on the second tune. I'm like, I can't do that. But there's so many spots in this. Like, again, me being a composer, a player, a producer, all these things like jump out at you as, wow, that was so well done. Like the rhythm guitars in Tempest during the solo section, they're playing off each other, doing some very cool counter rhythms to each other. Now, and then your solo just like soars above it. It's great. That section really takes you for a ride. Now, my question is, like, those parts, did you compose them that way prior to it, or was that something when you were recording, okay, you laid down the first track and then you just started playing on it? Did that happen in the studio, or was that in the compositional phase?
That's probably more a trial and error, throwing stuff against the wall in the studio thing and finding like, I like the way this feels.
Yeah.
And to keep going with this. A lot of stuff for me happens by way of just throwing stuff against the wall. Let's see. And the other thing is, a lot of times I'm like, this solo section or this particular section, this bridge or whatever, it's a cool idea, but it doesn't feel right yet.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating sometimes when I'm working with other people, particularly producers or engineers, because then they'll say, well, what is it you're looking for, Greg? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know that I'll know it when I hear it. I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm not sure, where to even, what direction to even go looking. I just know that something's not clicking.
Right.
So maybe try something different rhythmically, try something different harmony-wise, try something different. I don't know. Maybe try something entirely different. I don't know, but something, So, yeah, I'm sort of just getting off on a tangent. But yes, to answer your question, a lot of stuff like the rhythm guitar parts on that song are just sort of, sitting down with the record button on and hey, this is cool. Yeah. Trying some stuff.
Now that had to be a fun piece to solo over. Like, do you feel like with those counter rhythms that's more inspiring to jam over than say you would have, like a lot of people would have just doubled those guitars left and right instead of having that? Did it feel like it made you feel a little more lively as you're playing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Anytime you hear anything like that, it's only because I think that it's making the song feel better.
Right.
And if it's making the song feel better, it's making me more inspired. And if I'm going to be blowing stuff on top of that, I'm just going to be more in it.
Yeah.
It's going to be more fun and more inspiring to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Now, like the next tune, 2 in 1, starts out with a very cool sort of Steely Dan-ish vibe to it. And then these heavy guitars come in and they really grab you. And that's a great change up, by the way. The tonal change affects a certain feel, However, the notes in that riff, it's not like a typical rock riff,
Right.
So harmonically, I could have heard like horns doing that or pianos doing that to keep it down that Steely Dan jazzy vibe. But so was that something, again, in composition, you're like, oh, if it gets real heavy here, that's going to really change it up? Or like when you heard that line, did you know you wanted it heavy guitar, or were you thinking, oh, that could be piano, that could be horns? Or...
No, I heard that as heavy guitar.
Yeah.
Before. Yeah. The contrast in energy from the Steely Dan to, suddenly Angus Young steps in the room or somebody, that's the contrast I actually wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted a nice dinner party to get disrupted.
Well, that's a perfect example. That's great. And that's one of those parts on the records that makes you go, it makes you jump up, say, wow, it grabs your attention. But what I even like more about it, again, is like that feel when that riff starts with that heavy guitar. That's just such a cool vibe. But what I thought was even cooler is the note selection in that riff. It wasn't just like a rock pentatonic riff, you know. So I thought that was really cool. And it's interesting for me to find out, what parts happen in the arranging production stage and what parts happen in the compositional stage. So it's cool to hear that, that was a perfect example. Disrupt the dinner party,
Right.
That was great.
Go ahead. The notes that you're talking about in the riff, those are the things that are hard to sometimes answer, because that's just I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
It's way before the fingers. It's now that I've heard this, I got to figure out how to play it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not trying things on the fretboard until something's cool. It's literally walking away from the guitar. And that's another thing I'll just throw in there. Some of the best approaches, or the most effective approaches I've had to coming up with parts, is to literally put the guitar down and walk away from it, so that I'm not feeling, because we are psychologically, once we have that guitar in our hands, we have sort of already by default limited ourselves.
Yes.
To what our fingers are capable of.
Very much so.
And you're right. And so if we're always counting on our fingers to come up with the answer, we're maybe dismissing a lot of ideas that would be here.
Yeah. So I agree 100%. Years ago, I wrote an article on composition and creativity, and that's one of the things I said. I personally try to write as much without the guitar in hand,
Yep.
And little voice recorder, humming melodies or riffs or whatever.
Yes.
And because we've been and I talk about this with my students all the time. We've been speaking since like 1 year old or whatever. So
Right.
we're much more comfortable and have more control over our vocal cords, even if we don't sing in key, you know.
Yep.
You get close enough that you know what it is, you know, when you try to figure it out on the instrument. And for me personally, it's like there's so many songs I would have never came up with my guitar in hand, you know.
Right.
And they're my favorite songs, you know.
Exactly.
Because you don't sound like you're repeating yourself all the time, which would happen if you just write with your guitar in hand, I think, anyway.
It lends itself to a more redundant kind of thing, but just because our fingers, we'd be relying on muscle memory of our fingers, and
exactly,
and we're just capable of much more. There's much more of a creative resource here, that we can access, if we can put the fingers down for a second.
Exactly, yeah.